And we're back. Thank you very much for joining Fox 2 Sierra. Today, we have in our podcast Dominic Luke from Guardian Rescue Innovative Training. Dominic is a retired Air Force pararescue jumper, and he's joining us today, and we're going to be talking about some of the various different training that he does with his company and how it plays into Fox 2 Sierra's mission. Izzy?
All right, so first of all, Dominic, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. We really appreciate it. I know your time is precious. So we want to talk about you, your background, sort of your origin story. Where were you born? If you can.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I appreciate you having me on today. Thanks. Nice. I'm glad to be here. Yeah, I was born in Houston, Texas, but I didn't really live there. That's not really what I call home. I was only there for a few months until I moved back home to New Orleans, Louisiana. So New Orleans is in my heart.
Got it. Like, it's also in your voice. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
All right. I'm just saying, we're from New York, so
sure. Yeah.
Definitely here from Louisiana. All right. And what was family life for young Dominic Luke growing up in New Orleans?
Oh man, family life. Well, I was the oldest of three. I'm the oldest brother. Growing up in the South, you grow up a Roman Catholic boy. You go to church on Sundays, go to Catholic school. So I did the private school life. I went to a Catholic high school, played sports. Did all of the things that a young American boy is supposed to do, right? Had a good family. My dad was in the Marines. He was in the reserve, so I wasn't active duty. So we lived, a life of rules. They were flexible sometimes, but for the most part, had a really good childhood. Got no complaints there.
Awesome. And in terms of sports, you mentioned sports. So what kind of sports did you play growing up?
Oh man, I was one of those kids that tried everything from soccer to football to baseball to karate, swimming, basketball. I found myself pretty much doing them all. Once I got to high school, I really focused on baseball and football. But I was an active kid, so I did, anything that was some type of competitive sport. I participated in it in some form or fashion at some point in my life.
All right. And what was the relationship like with your brothers?
Yeah, so I have a younger sister. She's the middle.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, younger sister and a younger brother. My sister and I are 3 years apart, so we were, relatively close growing up. My brother and I are 9 years apart. So that's a pretty big age difference. So when I was leaving, to go to college and everything, he was just starting to mature. So, brother and sisters, we all have our bumps along the road, but we all love each other.
Got it. Now, here's a question for you. Young Dom, what kind of trouble did you get into as a kid?
Good question. Well, I was a pretty strong-headed kid, and I knew pretty much from a young age the things that I wanted to do and where I wanted to go, and so obviously that caused a little riffraff between my parents and I at times. But I got into the normal trouble, speeding tickets and staying up too late and stealing beer from people's fridges that garages were open. Just I lived in a really great neighborhood with a really good group of friends, and so we were in a pretty safe space to be able to stay up all night and ride our bikes through our neighborhood and do the dumb things that you're supposed to do, like starting bonfires in the woods and blowing stuff up when you're not supposed to. But for the most part, I would say I didn't have any major infractions on my record.
All right, that's cool.
Yeah.
And so growing up, like, what did the future look like for you as a kid? What did you see yourself doing when you got older? Or did you have any idea?
Yeah, I actually did. I knew pretty young that I wanted to get into business. I wanted to own my own businesses. Real estate was something that really spoke to me. I was really interested in real estate development. From a young age, my grandfather was an architect. So I was kind of around that growing up, and real estate development was just something that I was attracted to. And so that was kind of, once I hit high school and kind of got into college, that was kind of my mode of thinking is I'm going to go and be a real estate developer, make a whole bunch of money, do this thing. And so that's kind of where my thought process was when it came to a career, but I knew that I wanted to go to college. I knew that there was things that I wanted to do, but I just needed to kind of figure out how. But I would say from around like 10, 11, 12 years old, when I was first introduced to just real estate investing, I was kind of attracted to it, so initially that's, I guess, where my mind was.
And was your grandfather your mentor when it came to real estate and investing?
He was definitely a mentor. I wouldn't say as far as investing, he was the guy that said, make sure you save your money, buy it safe kind of thing. But he was no doubt a mentor and a patriarch of our family for sure.
All right. So at what point in the arc of your young life do you start contemplating military?
Yeah, I almost joined the military right after high school. Like I said, my dad was in the Marines, my grandfather was in the Navy, my other grandfather was in the Army. So every male in my family had some role in the military at some point. And, I wasn't the best of students. I probably didn't work as hard as I could have. And so that affected my grades and getting into a university and getting into college. And my senior year, as I was trying to figure that whole thing out, I was like, maybe I should just join the military, right? And so I went and talked to a Marine recruiter. My dad was a Marine, and I just thought it was the way to go. And came to the house, we had the conversations, all the things. And, my mom was like, Dominic, I would really like it if you went to college first. Instead of going right into the military, like we'll help you go to college, and so after having that conversation, I was like, you know what, let me go do that. Let me go to college. Let me see what it's about. Let me give it, a couple years. And then if I want to join the military, then, I'll figure it out then. So I almost joined right out of high school, but I didn't. I ended up going to Baton Rouge Community College, and I went there for about a year and a half before I transferred to LSU, Louisiana State University. But in that time frame of possibly transferring from Baton Rouge Community College to LSU, I almost joined the Marines again. I was in college. I was, doing all, partying, doing all these stupid things. And I was unsure if I was going to be able to get into LSU. I was like, this might be the time for me to join the Marines. If I don't get into LSU, I'm going to go into the military. Well, I got into LSU. So I ended up staying, graduating. And I graduated from LSU in December of 2008. And then I moved back home. I got my real estate license. I started working for a real estate development company, started selling commercial real estate, doing all of the things. It was 2009. And, I was 23, 24 at the time, living back home with my parents, trying to establish somewhat of a career, make some money, pay off student loans, all of the things that the big guy says you're supposed to do. And I quickly realized that, the market crashed. I'm not making any money. I want to travel. I want to learn how to jump out of an airplane. I want to learn how to save somebody's life. I want to learn how to skydive. Like I had all this, or scuba dive. I had all these things that I wanted to do, and I wasn't going to be able to do them in Covington, Louisiana, working at a real estate company. And so that's when my mind started thinking about the military again. And I had just had two buddies of mine that I know, they had just gotten their tridents. They just became SEALs. And so as I was kind of like tossing these ideas around about military again, I was like, okay, I know that I already have a degree. I know that I can, push myself. If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to join the military, I want to do something that's going to really push me and test me and see what I'm made of, And so I literally typed in, this is no shit, hardest military jobs. And the first thing that popped up was Pararescue. The second thing was Navy SEALs and Ranger. It kind of went, put them in order, the top 5 hardest jobs. And I didn't really know what Pararescue was. And so I did a little bit of research, and It was literally everything in the job description, everything that it offered was exactly what I was looking to do. All right. And so I started doing some homework on it. I went and talked to a recruiter, spent some time really thinking about it. And it wasn't until one night I was in my room, I was in bed watching TV, and I was having a conversation with God. And I was like saying, you know, man, if the military is supposed to be for me, if I'm supposed to go and become or try at that time, try to become a PJ, send me some type of
Send me a sign. Send me a sign.
something, right? And I'm not making this up when I tell you this. I'm laying in bed, and I shit you not, in about 2 or 3 minutes later, a commercial comes on television. These two dudes run out of the back of a C-130. They jump into the air. They land on the ground, switching to thermals. They turn their thermals on. They go and they find this guy on the ground, throw him over his shoulder, and they ruck out of there. And then at the end of it, it's like Air Force Pararescue. It's not fiction. It's science, or it's not science. It's whatever the slogan was.
It's not science fiction. It's real.
It's not science fiction. It's real, or whatever the slogan was. And I was just like,
fuck yeah, that's that right.
Thank you. I went to the recruiter's office the next day and signed the papers.
Wow.
Yeah.
So a couple things about what you just shared with us. So I'm curious, when your mom insisted on you going to college, do you think that was like her way of trying to, you know, push you in a certain direction with the hope that maybe you wouldn't go into the military if you took, you know, her advice?
Possibly.
Okay.
You know, I mean, she's a mom. She knows the thing. She knows the possible outcomes of military life, you know, and I think it was her way of just protecting me a little bit longer.
Right. And then I think sort of a common theme with like tier one operators are, you know, similar backgrounds to yours in terms of like growing up, the family nucleus, you know, not necessarily excelling at school, but, you know, having this drive to do something more. With you though, that hit or your desire, I guess, to detach from the norm hit a little bit later than most. Would you agree? Like at 24, that's late to be you know, looking to go into a tier one unit, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, at the time I didn't think that I was gonna be. I guess at the time I didn't really know what I was capable of. You know, I didn't know, and that was part of why I wanted to go. Is like I want to test myself. I want to see if I'm capable of, you know, making it through one of the hardest selections in the military, making it through and becoming this operator and working my way through the ranks and getting to a unit that, you know, is at the top of the food chain. I wanted to see if I could do it, you know, and I was fortunate at a time in my life where my girlfriend and I just broke up. I wasn't making any money. I was living at home. At this point, I was like, what do I have to lose? You know? And so I joined the military to do one thing and one thing only, and that was to become a PJ. And back then it was, you know, I joined, let's see, in 2010 is when I finally joined and left. October of 2010 is when I left to go to boot camp. And at that time, it was you could join the military for pararescue or a special operations job. And if you didn't make it, there was a program where you could get out. Like you didn't have to stay in.
Wow.
Or something. I don't even really remember what it was. It was like you had to cross train, or if you didn't make it in a certain amount of time, you could. I don't really remember the rules. And so I literally just said, listen, I'm joining the military to do one thing and one thing only, and that's to be a PJ. And if I don't make it, then I'm out. I'm not gonna go, or I'm gonna figure out a way to do something else. But I had no other really backup plan or backup job or anything in mind. It was just to become a PJ, and that was my only goal. And I just wanted to see what I was made of. Honestly, I wanted to see if I was able to be one of these, you know, you see these shows, you see these movies, it's like, oh, fucking badass, you know, and but that's real. Those are, you know, those are real people doing those real jobs, going through real shit, that go through real training, that have to become to get into those positions. And I was like, you know what do I have to lose? Like, what, you know, let's go try this, you know. And I ended up making it. So
yeah, so it's sort of interesting, and not that, you know, I can speak from personal experience, but from listening to many people speak about their experiences, in the Navy, you didn't have that luxury. If you went and tried to get a SEAL contract, or you were in the Navy and then you went to BUDS, if you didn't make it, you were going back to a ship, and you were stuck. That was it. And that was all the impetus a lot of these guys needed to persevere and push through, because the thought of like swabbing a deck, or working in the boiler room, that was just not an option for them, So it's kind of cool that the Air Force was structured differently, at least by your recollection, that you might have had an out, not that you were looking for it.
Yeah, and the thing is, I wasn't even looking for it, but I knew that I had no other plan.
Right.
I had no other job in mind. I had nothing else in mind. It was just like, I'm going to be a PJ, and if this doesn't work out, then we'll figure it out then. And so I know that there was guys at the time that did recycling out, and they got put in other jobs that they did not want to do, because they signed this contract that they had to commit to the military. And so I didn't even really try to put that in my mind of like, what would I do if I don't make it? It was just like, for me, I don't really have a choice,
Right.
This is what I'm going to do.
So, nowadays with the internet and whatnot, people can Google shit and they find out a lot of information. Lord knows I do it all the time. I love doing that. And I think when it comes to tier 1 level, operators, you hear all about the SEALs, less so about Delta, and there's that back and forth about, SEALs like to be SEALs so they can write their books, and Delta's like still quiet about it. But you don't really hear that much about PJs. I think they're first making a movie. I don't know if you're aware of this, with Jake Gyllenhaal, about the PJ that went into rescue SEALs and in Afghanistan.
Jason Cunningham.
I'm sorry?
Jason Cunningham's story.
Yeah.
Oh, really? No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, it's in the works. I read something about it, but you don't hear that much about PJs. And I make mention of it because, you Googled something, this is what popped up. A lot of people who are contemplating which branch to go into will do their due diligence. They'll go online, they'll try to deep dive, get as much information as possible, what's required. I mean, how much information did you have other than that Googling, the hardest jobs in the military?
Yeah, no, that was pretty much it. And then once I started doing my research, I looked up some books. I bought a book that was written by a PJ called That Others May Live that I read. I looked on YouTube at different, they make those 3, 4, 5-minute clips of hard training, and I started watching all of those. But for the most part, I really didn't know what I was getting myself into, because especially back then, I say back then, it wasn't even that long ago, but 2010, 2011, 2012, the marketing around special operations jobs wasn't what it is today.
Right.
Air Force is doing a much better job nowadays marketing special warfare and those types of jobs. But when I walked into my recruiter's office, I said, hey, I think I want to become a PJ. And he's like, no, you don't. That's not what you want to do. You want to become security forces. And I was like, well, does security forces go to free fall school? And he's like, no, they don't. I said, does security forces go to scuba diving school? And he said, nope. I said, does security forces go to paramedic school? And he said, nope. I said, all right, well, does security forces go to high angle technical rescue rope school? And he said, no. I said, well, that's not what I want to do. I want to do all those other things. And that's what PJs do. And so I can either sign the papers with you, or I'll go find another recruiter to sign them with, but that's what I'm going to do. And that's when he was like, okay, then he kind of taking me a little bit more serious, when I told him exactly what I was trying to accomplish.
So here's something funny. It seems like the Air Force recruiters are dramatically different than, let's say, Army and Navy, in that the stories of people going into recruiters' offices and saying, this is what I want to do, and they walk out having signed the contract for something completely different, because the recruiter sells them something that they have no idea what they're signing on for. And you have sort of the reverse. It's like you school the recruiter rather than have the recruiter, pigeonhole you and push you in the direction that they needed to check off. Oh, we're missing somebody for,
They got quotas to fill like everybody else. They gotta, we don't need any of that MOS right now. We need something else.
Exactly. And I mean, look, the failure rate to join them, to become a PJ is high. It's like 80, 90% failure rate, and so that hurts the recruiters' numbers.
Right.
they aren't getting met, you know. But additionally, if those people do make it through, I think those recruiters have some type of a bonus that they make or something, or at least they did back then. I'm not sure if they still do, but you know, so yeah, it was interesting to, and I, you know, again, I went into a recruiter's office 23 years old, college degree, you know, a little bit more mature than the normal 18-year-old, 19-year-old who's going in there with their parents. You know, I went in there with my due diligence done. My dad was with me and I was like, listen, I'm here to do this, you know.
Now, because you had a college degree, I know for me, I went to do Marine JAG Corps. So when I walked in the door, I had the college degree, I had a law degree. You know, it's OCS right out of the gates. They're like, their eyes just like, you know, get all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, because that's like next level for a recruiter if they get an officer in. In light of the fact that you already had your college degree, is that like another thing that they tried to sell you on?
It was, yeah. He asked me if I wanted to go to OCS. And I even asked him, I said, well, what's the, you know, what are the benefits? What am I going to have to do that? And blah, blah, blah. He's like, well, if you are interested, this is the process. You have to get 3 letters of approval or 3 written letters of recommendations from, you know, pretty high people. You have to go sit in front of a board of officers and they have to interview you. After that interview, we'll then make a decision on whether you will fit into an OCS slot. Then then you'll apply to OCS, like this whole thing. And I'm like, okay, well, how long is that going to take? He's like, it'll probably take about a year and a half. I'm like, no, I'm out. I want to go right now. I'm done. I'm not any longer.
Right.
I don't care that much about becoming an officer. I want to go and do PJ stuff, you know. And I knew that officers did get some of the training that PJs got. They didn't get all of it, you know, but their job's a lot different than an enlisted PJ, you know, and I didn't really want any part of that. I wanted to go and do all of the PJ stuff.
All right, cool. So can you tell us about the pipeline? Like you go, you sign up with the recruiter, what happens next?
Yeah, I mean, so you have to take what's called a PASS test, the physical assessment, something, I don't remember.
Like the ASVAB or?
No, well, you have to take the ASVAB, yes, but the PASS test is the actual physical test that you have to take before you can be qualified to sign up for Pararescue. So you have to swim, I think, 500 meters, 2 underwaters. You got to run 1.5 miles in a certain amount of time, certain amount of push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, all of those things. So you have to pass all of those before you can even qualified to become a candidate, right? And once you pass the PASS test, then you're able to apply for the job and put your name in the hat. So once your name's in the hat and you have a job selection for you, you then wait to go to boot camp. And then you go to boot camp just like you would go to any sister branches boot camp. It's whatever it was, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever, you know, the normal military style boot camp, getting you in line, teaching you the system, right? Once boot camp is over, you then go to your first phase of selection, which at the time I went through was called the indoctrination course. I think now it's called assessment and selection. The process is a little different now than it was back then. My indoctrination course was 11 weeks long, and that's where they really, you know, weed out the weak. We started with, I believe, 145 people on my team. And by the end of the 11 weeks, we had 32 graduated.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's a very high attrition rate.
Yeah, very high at the very beginning, you know, and it's still high throughout the remaining courses and the schoolings that you have to go to. But that indoctrination course is really there to test you. And man, it was just an everyday grind of getting your ass whooped mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, all of the things, right? Because the instructors are there to try to weed out the weak. They are trying to break you, and you are trying to survive. And
right. So like in the Navy, you know, they have, you know, Hell Week, and, you know, in the Rangers, they got Robin Sage. Is there an equivalent in, you know, the Air Force PJ pipeline in that 11 weeks?
Yeah, they have what's called ETD, Extended Training Day. So it's similar to like a Hell Week or a Robin Sage course, where it's 24 hours of just madness, you know. It seems like it's chaotic madness, but it's actually really controlled madness, obviously. But, you know, it is, I think it's into like week 5 or week 6 of your indoctrination course where they put you through the ringer. And it's like, it's ETD, it's 1 24-hour time frame, but it feels like it's all week long, because you know that it's getting ready to hit you. You don't know when they're going to start banging on your door in the middle of the night, put you through this 24-hour test. But so yeah, that indoctrination course is very similar to the way that Buds is set up, or the way that Ranger Pipeline is set up, where you're there for a number of weeks, and each week you're expected to perform at a higher level each week, learning new things each week, right? Whether it's in the pool, whether it's on land, whether it's whatever it may be. But yes, in comparison to like Hell Week or Robin Sage or any of that, it's called extended training day.
Now, how much of the 11 weeks is water-based training?
Every day.
Every day.
Every day.
Wow.
Yeah, Monday through Friday is our training day, right? Saturdays and Sundays were off. But Monday through Friday was training. And, we would start in the morning with runs, workouts, different types of circuit training, grass and gorillas, those types of things. We would then get into the pool about mid-morning and do some type of a fin, right? With weight belts on, 1,000-meter, 2,000-meter, 3,000-meter fins, just back and forth. We then break for lunch, and then the afternoon was just pool work, and it was called Pool Con, or Confidence, right? And so that's where we did all of our subsurface work, holding your breath, doing underwaters, the length of the pool, right? Doing ditch and dons, where you're taking your gear off, leaving it at the bottom. You're surfacing, taking a breath, and then you're going back down, putting all your gear back on a breath hold. There's buddy breathing. Buddy breathing was my fucking nemesis. I hated it, right? Where you're sharing one snorkel and you're passing it between you and your buddy, and your instructor is literally just beating the shit out of you, pretending like it's a rogue wave and you're just getting tossed around in the ocean, right? So every day that was our schedule. Run, lift, cardio, something hard in the morning, some type of fin, some type of workout, whether it was an open lake fin or a pool fin. We'd break for lunch, and then the entire afternoon was nothing but pool confidence, or water con is what we called it.
Got it. Right. So this 11 weeks sounds like, weed out the weak, weed out, the people that not going to make it down the line. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really what it comes down to is it's just an everyday grind. Where you're getting ready to go do.
Right.
Doing it every single day, and every day it's getting harder. Every day the instructors are pushing you harder and yelling at you more and all of this, right? But that's what breaks dudes down, knowing that, holy shit, what I just did today might have been the hardest day of my life, but now I got to go do it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, right? And so that's where you see a lot of people quit and a lot of people fail, because they can't stay in the present moment and just focus on the present moment. They start thinking about all these things that are coming up later on down the road that are just going to be continuous suck fests, right? Yeah. Instead of just getting through one evolution at a time. That's where a lot of people start giving up.
Got it. All right. So you make it through Indoc, and then what happens after that?
Yeah. So Indoc, you become an Indoc grad. You then go to dive school. You head to Panama City, and you go to dive school. I believe it's 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. And that's combat dive school. Air Force has its own. And that's where you learn how to scuba dive. You become a combat diver, and that's a pretty tough school in itself, because it's a lot of underwater stuff. It's a lot of math. It's a lot of, really dangerous, complex calculations that you do underwater with your gear. But it's also a physical test, because, that's where you do have some sort of a breathing apparatus. But that's where the instructors, I'm sure you've seen them on those television shows and all that combat.
Shut off the air.
They take your air off, they put you in knots, they put it all, and you as the operator, or as the candidate anyway, or what they would call us as cones, PJ cones, until you graduate and become a PJ, you're just considered a cone. And so that's where, you got to remain calm, remembering that you just went through 11 weeks of stuff that got you here, right? And start working all of the problems, whether it's knots behind your back, whether your gear's all messed up, or whether you're just getting the shit beat out of you by an instructor. So that's, combat dive school. And then, so once you graduate combat dive school, and I think it's a little different now, but this is what it was when I was going through, is you would graduate combat dive school, and then you would PCS to Albuquerque in New Mexico. And that's where you would then be stationed for the entirety of your PJ pipeline.
Got it. Okay. And how long is combat dive school?
I think it's like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe 5. I can't remember.
All right. So after that, what happens?
Yeah, after that, so you go to you PCS and you get stationed in Albuquerque, and in Albuquerque is where the PJ Combat Rescue Officer Schoolhouse is. That's our headquarters. That's where people graduate. That's where you go through all of the rest of your training, right? And so you're stationed in Albuquerque for probably, depending on how long it takes you to graduate all of your schools, year and a half, 2 years roughly in Albuquerque, right? But that's kind of your base. And so from there, you go to Georgia for jump school. You then go to Washington for SEER and survival school. You then go to either San Diego or Yuma, Arizona for free fall school. And then you also, in Albuquerque, is where you go to EMT basic and paramedic school.
Now, my understanding, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, the medical component of it is probably the longest of all the training pipelines. Is that accurate?
Well, it is the longest of our pipeline. Yes, it's like 6 to 7 or 8 months. I can't remember the exact time, but in that time frame between that 6 to 8 months, we're getting EMT basic and nationally registered paramedics. Those are two programs. EMT basic in itself is, as a civilian, I think is like a 6-month course, maybe a year, and then paramedic civilian wise is like a 2-year course.
Right.
We're getting both of those in a matter of 8 months.
Okay. And is that's Air Force exclusively runs that school?
So we had a contract through the University of New Mexico.
Right.
Our schoolhouse, and they taught us that their paramedic program, right? And we would do our rotations. So like I went to Philadelphia for 8 weeks and did all my clinical rotations in the hospitals and on fire trucks up there.
Right.
To get all my hours. And so within a matter of 8 months, I knew zero medicine to becoming a, nationally registered paramedic.
Right. Now, also are like corpsmen from, let's say, the Navy, are they also coming to your training? No, this is just exclusively Air Force?
Exclusively PJs.
Exclusively PJs. Okay, cool. So you're going to airborne school, you're going to free fall school, you're getting your medical, training. The high angle you mentioned before, right? High angle rescue, that's ropes courses essentially, right?
Yep.
And you went to SEER up in the Northwest.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
All right. Do you have to do any like cold weather training?
Yeah, so that happens. So the way that the pipeline is set up is you go to all of these individual schools, right? You pass them all, you become a paramedic, you go to jump school, you go to free fall, you go to survival. My SEER school was Thanksgiving weekend or Thanksgiving week. So I was surviving in snow up to my waist. So yes, I did go through some cold training. But what they do is at the end of all of those, once you've gone through all of your schools, you now have to go through a 6-month course called the apprentice course, the PJ apprentice course. And that's where you put everything together and you learn how to use all of your knowledge, all of your skills to become a PJ, right? So you go during that 6-month course, you go to shoot, you go through what's called land nav, you go through a med phase, you go through high angle phase, you go through a water operations phase, you go through an air operations phase, and then you culminate it with a final training exercise, which is like a week long where you're on a deployed FOB and you're just running missions, doing the things that you know how to do, right? And so that's where it all culminates and comes together. And then at the end, you graduate, you now put on your you put on your maroon beret and you head out to your team.
Got it. Now, where in all this pipeline are you getting like weapons and tactics trainings?
During their apprentice courses where that happens.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's the weapons phase. So I think the way that it's set up now, I believe it's like med phase. In order to move to the next phase, you have to pass med phase. So the whole time, you got to think about this, the whole 2 years, you're being tested, you're being watched, you're being evaluated, you're constantly being tested. So just because you pass INDOC doesn't mean you're becoming a PJ. Right. You pass all of these schools and then you get to the apprentice course and everything you do is a test pretty much. right? So med phase is like 3 or 4 weeks. You got to pass that. If you don't pass that, you got to wait till the next team starts and you get rolled back, right? You go from med phase into weapons phase. That's where you learn about weapons. That's 4, 5, 6 weeks, whatever it may be. So now you're able to take the medicine and start incorporating it into the tactics, right? From there, you go into land nav, where land navigation, 3, 4 weeks out in the woods doing, all the things that you need to do. From land nav, you then go into air ops. That's where you start learning how to jump out of an airplane as a team, as in a group of people, right? And then you go into water ops, which is water operations down in Florida, where you jump out of helicopters into the ocean, and you do all types of different water hoists and rescues and rope ladders, climbing out the water, all of that stuff. And then I think the next one is like technical rescue, which is your high angle phase. That's your rope phase, and I think that's like another 3 or 4 weeks. And then I can't remember. You get like you learn how to drive a Humvee. You learn how to do this. You learn how to start doing military operator type stuff, and then you culminate it with a final training exercise where you and your team are deployed. Your officers are doing the officer thing, you're doing the PJ thing, and you're kind of like on a seesaw rotation where there's just missions running 24 hours a day for like a week, and different individual teams are responding to those missions. And if you do well, and you don't fail anything, then you graduate.
Got it. Now, are you going through the pipeline with the same people, say that you started with an indoc, or is there attrition? Are you rotating into other schools and starting with new people? How does that work?
Yes, most likely. Some of the people that I graduated indoc with, I ended up going through the entire pipeline. It just kind of depends on where your schedule falls and what schools you go to, right? Because it's kind of like a free-for-all almost whenever schools start popping up, and it's like, oh, I'm going to go to that one, and I'll go to this one. So you kind of get somewhat separated, but you're all in the same dorms. You're all in the same, co-located in the same area, so sometimes you have some dudes on your team for this class, and then you have another dude on your team for this class. So it's kind of hit or miss.
Like being you switch, you take this class or that class or whatever, and you're all in the same grade. You're not starting the same class at the same time.
Yeah. It's very dependent upon what's happening in the moment at the for scheduling and schools and that sort of thing.
Got it. Now, you mentioned CSAR. Now, when you're done with the pipeline, are you now first responding to, let's say, calls like locally, like on a civilian level, like search and rescue, or are you getting deployed immediately?
No, well, it depends. CSAR, combat search and rescue, is just one aspect of our job. That's what we did for a really long time in Afghanistan and Iraq, was, the CSAR mission. We also do CASEVAC, casualty evacuation. But we also do have a proponent of our job that is humanitarian, right? So hurricane relief, natural disasters up in the west, on the West Coast, or in Nepal, and in Japan. Our Japan unit does a lot of that. Or the Thai cave rescue is a really great example of a humanitarian rescue that we took place in. So it's really unique because pararescue, when it comes to in the eyes of the Department of Defense, is we are technical rescue experts, right? So rescue, that's a broad topic, right? We're able to do almost all of it in some form or fashion, which really gives us the capability to be anywhere, everywhere, all the time, anytime, which is pretty unique when it comes to special operations, right? Most special operations jobs have like one mission set, mission SEALs, kick in doors, shoot people in the face. DevGru, CAG, they're very specific mission. Pararescue is rescue, right? So our mindset is a little bit different when it comes to missions. We're rescue minded, right? We can still go in and kick in doors and shoot people in the face. That's what we do. But we can also look at problems and solve them in a little bit of a different way.
Right. All right. So any funny or notable stories throughout your journey through the pipeline that stick out?
Oh, man.
Too many to list.
it's really funny because when you go through this sort of an experience, human experience that you go through when it comes to becoming a special operations guy, you start to form this brotherhood with these people that you're going through. We're all going through the same thing at some point. We're all suffering at some point, and you really start to lean on each other a lot. And so I can tell you, there's many things that, you go through with guys that are funny, that are emotional, that are just flat out interesting, because you have a very wide array of backgrounds of people coming into this job, and so I'm trying to think of something though that I can share that is worth sharing.
I mean, we could circle back, if you want.
Let's circle back.
Sure. Okay. Let's talk about, if again, provided you're willing.
Where'd you deploy the first time? Your first deployment, where was it?
Yeah, we're gonna get to that. Yeah.
Okay. Is that what you were gonna ask, Izzy?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about deployments, to whatever extent you felt comfortable talking about it.
Sure, yeah. So after I graduated, I got stationed in Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas. That was my first duty station. Went through Green Team there, got onto a team there, and I got stationed there in May of 2013, and I deployed in January of 14. So 6 months, 5, 6, 7 months after I got there, we deployed. We deployed to Sicily. We were covering down on northern Africa and kind of that whole section of Africa, and I wish I could sit here and tell you some really awesome stories about Sicily and these cool missions that we did, but I just don't have any. It's funny how like people go through this training pipeline with hopes and aspirations of like doing these crazy awesome missions and things, right? And then you get into it and you're like, just at that time of my career, 2013, 2014, diplomatically things were weird in the world. We had a different administration in the office at the time, and so there was all of these like things happening, right? But none of it never played out into my favor of going out and like participating. It was just like, oh, let's go. Wait, no, can't go. Oh, we're going to get riled up here. We're going to go do this. Oh, never mind. Oh, let's go do this over here. We're going to, never mind. They got it, And so there was a lot of that in my career where it was just like, hurry up. Let's go. We're leaving. Never mind. Called off.
Right. President
didn't sign off on it, or Secretary of Defense didn't say that, or whatever the circumstances are, So, when it came to my deployment, we just didn't. The greatest thing about my deployment was I got to spend some really great time with some brothers, and we got to do some really, really cool training operations that we probably never would have been able to do anywhere else, from climbing San Vito down in Sicily multiple times a week, doing different types of rescue operations there, to doing different types of water operations in the Mediterranean Sea along the coast of Sicily. I mean, it's just, we had things that we were doing that not everybody gets to do in their life,
Sure. Favorite other unit that you ever worked with as a PJ?
So when I was in Italy, we worked with the Italian PJs equivalent, right? The equivalent of what the PJs were here. We worked with those Italian guys, but it was a little different language, obviously, physically, but also just like a different mindset around rescue. We didn't do too much with them. They came and really wanted just to learn from us the way that we do things, how we pack out our med rucks, how we do different types of high angle rescue and that sort of thing. It wasn't until I switched over to the 24th and got into that tier 1 realm where I started working with other sister branches in a different capacity where things kind of got interesting.
So when was that?
So after I got back from my deployment, I stayed in Vegas all the way through the end of 2014. And then I got stationed at the 24th STS in North Carolina in January of 2015.
Okay, now you say STS. There's two units, right? Within PJs, there's STS and there's another unit. Is that right?
Well, the way that yeah. So the way that it's split up is a rescue unit or an STS unit. Rescue units are very heavy in CSAR, CASEVAC, medevac, that sort of thing. STS is Special Tactics Squadron, attached to Ranger teams, SEAL teams, CAG, DevGru, all of that. So it's just two different sides of the career field.
Right. And how long were you attached to STS?
I was there for 2 years until I separated.
Got it. Okay. So that must have been a wild time.
Yeah, it was, man, it was really interesting because, you know, that unit is a special mission unit, right? So you have a certain selection you have to go through, a certain process you have to go through. But at the time that I was in the career field, that unit was looking for PJs. They reached out to a bunch of different commanders within the career field around the country, around the world. And they said, hey, we're looking for PJs. We're starting this program called Direct Hire Program, where if you have some PJs that you think could operate at this level right now, they don't have to go through Green Team. They'll come through the interview process, and they'll be here for a few days, and we'll interview them. And if they meet our qualifications, we'll hire them right now, and they can come straight to the unit. Whereas normally you have to go through a really long selection phase, then you go through a really long operator training course, OTC, operator training course phase, right? To start operating at that level. And, you know, I was fortunate enough to have a commander who believed in me. I was hungry at that time in my career to really step it up to the next level. I wanted to try to be the best PJ that I knew that I could be. And so I applied for this job, and they were only taking like 3 or 4, maybe 5 PJs for this direct hire role. And my commander spoke highly of me. I went and I did the interview process, and I was fortunate enough to get picked up and invited into the unit to become an operator for him. And so that's how my career got started there, a little bit differently. So I was in a position where, like, I really had to be on my A game. I really had to be on my A game because I didn't go through the normal selection phase that everybody else goes through, right? I didn't go through the Green Team. I didn't go through the initial assessment and selection phase. So I really had to make sure that I was on my A game to show these guys, like, hey,
you belonged, right? That you belong.
I know what I'm doing. Exactly. Yeah. That I knew what I was doing, that I was competent, that they could trust me with the mission set, because, you know, once you get operating at those levels, the mission set changes, and your mindset has to change in order to accomplish some of those missions, right? And so those 2 years at that unit were the best 2 years of my career, because I was forced every day to show up ready to fucking go at 100%.
Right. I was going to say, while it sounds like it may have been easier, it actually was harder, probably as a teammate, right? Because you hadn't been vetted, essentially, right? So every day was your vetting.
Yes, every day I had to show up, proven to these guys who have been doing, you know, these dudes have been at this unit for 4, 5, 6, 10, 15 years, right? Doing this stuff. And so for me, a young PJ at the time, I was like 27, 28 years old at this point, one deployment, no serious experience, just the will to really learn and the will to have this open mind. And I was hungry, man. I was hungry.
But you also had climbing mountains in Italy. Let's be fair.
I mean, yeah,
right.
I guess.
I'm kidding.
But I knew that I wanted to be there, and I knew that I could be there. And the circumstances just played in my favor to get me there a whole lot faster. And so,
right.
So yeah, that's how I ended up at that unit.
All right. So we're almost at the hour mark, and I want to spend so much time talking about the 24th, because that seems like probably the most exciting component of your PJ career. But due to time constraints, let's switch. If you're all right with that, we'll switch to separation in 2017. And then, like, how did you know it was time to punch that card? And what was the goal? I'm guessing it wasn't real estate.
Yeah, it's funny. So I got to a point in my career. This was right when I got back from my deployment, when I was in Vegas, where my contract was about to be up. And I went and talked to my commander, and I told him, I said, listen, I have aspirations of going to the 24th. If that's not possible, if you don't see that being in my cards, if you don't think that I would do well at that unit, then I'm going to separate from the military, because I'm ready to move on and do some other things with my life. My commander said, no, I think you would do well at the 24th. Let's go and apply and see if you'll make it. I made it. I extended my contract for 2 more years, and that is that. Towards the end of my extension, my 2-year extension, I was at the 24th. I was doing these things that, the first year I was there, I was gone probably 200 days out of the year, right? The traveling and the TDY and just the amount of time that I was gone, it was a lot. It was a lot, and people don't also get like what it feels like to get a call in the middle of the night and say, hey, you got to come into work, we're leaving. And you kiss your wife and you say, hey, I'm leaving. I don't know where I'm going. I'll let you kind of know whenever I figure something out. See you later. I love you. Right. To go through that multiple times a year, a week, or whatever it is, it starts to take a toll on you. And it starts. And for me, I was at a point in my life where, I joined the Air Force knowing that it wasn't going to be a career, like a lifelong career for me. I joined to do one thing, was become a PJ, test myself, do some really awesome stuff, and then move on and go do something else. And so my career at the 24th was getting to the point where I was having so much fun and I was doing so many really incredible things, but I was also starting to get to the point where I was like, all right, I think I'm ready to do something else and kind of start testing myself in another way, And so I just started thinking about, all right, what is it that I'm drawn to? What are some other aspirations that I have? And for me, it was business. I wanted to become a businessman. I wanted to start opening some businesses. I have an entrepreneurial spirit in my heart since I've been born, I think. And so I knew that I was ready to go and start making some big boy money. I was ready to kind of take my life to the next level of whatever that may be. And additionally, I wanted to start a family, and I didn't want to have a family in the military. I didn't want to constantly be gone from my kids. I didn't want to leave children home with my wife for months at a time. And so it was just for me getting to a point where I was ready to start making my own life decisions, right? And not leaving my entire life to the government, to people making decisions for me and saying, go here now, and we'll let you know when you can come back, kind of thing. And so that started formulating my process into this transitioning out of the military, right? And I don't think I was prepared for that as well as I could have been, because that transition from that world that not a lot of people know about, just tier 1 special operations. You're in a very small, tight-knit community of people that know what you do, why you do it, where you're going, that sort of thing. Once you leave that world and you come back into what I call fairyland, sometimes people don't get it. They just don't get it, And so I moved back home thinking I was prepared to come home to, my old friends and my, all these things that I knew growing up. And when I got here, I was just like, I was very taken back by just that process of not having that community that I was so used to having for so many years, So I think that would probably be the hardest part about leaving the military, was to transition out and trying to learn how to become a civilian again, when you go from this person that has this top secret clearance and all these things to like
Regular person.
somebody who has no idea who you are and no idea what you're capable of, and they're just like talking to you like you're an idiot. And it's like,
right, you go from James Bond to Mr. Bean.
Right, basically.
I don't know about
now. Right, exactly. You're online like everybody else at the grocery store, and
and it was just different. It was just very different, and now now you throw in mental illnesses. Now you throw in PTSD. Now you throw in transitioning and communication with your wife and now she's pregnant, and now you want to start a business, and you got all of these things that start commingling in towards one another, and you're still trying to heal from the trauma that you just left your boys, you know, on the X because you were ready to punch out, you know. And so you have all of these thoughts that run through your mind that can really have an effect on you. And for me, it did for a while. And you know, I was fortunate enough to start navigating that and like diving into those things and figuring out how to make this transition a little bit smoother. You know, when I was introduced to, you know, a group of people down here in Louisiana, and I went through my first guided group session of MDMA, that's when things started to shift for me big time, because psychedelic therapy it allows you to access a different part of your brain. It turns this front portion of your brain off, your prefrontal cortex, that is in charge of, you know, future planning, negative self-talk, positive self-talk, all of these things that, you know, are constantly going on in your mind. It happens right here in the front part of your brain. Well, with psychedelics, it almost turns that off in a sense, and it starts to activate this back portion of your brain, your creative brain, right? And so for me, what happened is I was introduced to this group. I went and I sat in a group setting of like 18 to 19 people at a house. The house was set up very cool. We had a dark room. We had an outside space. We had a meditation room. We had a dance room. We had like a canvas painting room, right? And we took this medicine, and we were able to just let the medicine kind of do its job and let us explore, right? And it wasn't until after that first psychedelic session that I started to realize the benefits of what psychedelic therapy can have on people, right? And so since that first one, I've gone through 3 total. MDMA, I've gone through a few psilocybin guided journeys, either solo on my own or with my wife, or in a group setting, you know, and that is a part of what I now do with my business, Guardian Rescue Innovative Training, right? There's certain aspects of my business where I'm teaching tactical medicine and decision making and leadership and active shooter drills and all that. That's one aspect. The other aspect is performance coaching and one-on-one coaching with high-level thinkers, forward-thinking individuals, CEOs, entrepreneurs, politicians, right? People who are constantly thinking forward, already thinking at higher levels. They're looking for somebody that can come in and help bring them to the next level, right? And as a performance coach, that's what I do. And I'm able to, when the time is right, when the relationship has been established, start incorporating some plant medicine into those coaching sessions. Start establishing that connection between plant medicine and people's soul and people's mind and the effects that it have on them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's interesting. All right. So I've had similar experiences. All right. So I do jujitsu. I don't do yoga, but I do jujitsu. And the marijuana and psilocybin are very big in the jujitsu world, because jujitsu essentially is a puzzle, right? It's a never-ending, complex series of problems that are ever evolving, and you're always trying to work yourself. It's literally the rat in the maze, right? It's trying to figure out, okay, if this doesn't work, can I back out? Can I go down this hallway? And so on. And this goes on repeat. What you say is, when you have those blockages, which everybody possesses, right? The minute you encounter that problem is the minute it's over, right? You succumb, right? The pressure now is overwhelming. You're going to tap, or you're going to be stuck there until you have no energy to proceed. And when you immerse yourself in the plant-based medicinal, you know, world,
Modality.
And those blockages, the roadblocks, all of a sudden they're not even there. It's not even like somebody rolls them back. You are now seeing things freely and clearly, unobstructed, and answers start appearing with minimal thought, if any. It's just a natural progression, right? And with it, the realization happens instantaneously, right? You're like, oh my goodness, I've had a breakthrough. If I tell you how many times I've had a breakthrough came out of my mouth, while rolling jujitsu, it'd make your head spin and you think I'm nuts, right? So when you're trying to explain this to the uninitiated, they'll look at you like you're a little cuckoo, right? Yeah. But the minute they experience the same thing that you're experiencing, right, without the medicinal properties, they then understand the complexities, they understand the problems, and they're like, well, how do we solve these? And when you start to progressively introduce it and they see the solutions, it's like you said, now we can come together as a group, we can have these incredible breakthroughs together, right? And it's not just euphoric, it's the growth that happens in such a short period of time that lasts far beyond this initial realization is mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. And then I don't want to say it's addictive. None of this is addictive in the sense that you want to do this problematically. The addiction is the clarity. The addiction is not walking around with the weight of the world on your shoulders. The addiction is wanting to continue the journey in a safe, methodical way where the rest of your life now flows from that without the stress doesn't impact you the same way. Life's trials and tribulations are not as heavy. You now have a navigation system that allows you to get around these obstacles in a way that doesn't impede you, and your communication improves as well. You can now speak to people much more effectively with much more clarity, in a way that people they're just convinced that whatever you're saying resonates with them. Yeah. You can speak on a different level. All right. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, but it totally speaks to me what you're talking about, and I've experienced it.
I'm with you. I feel it. I resonate with everything you're saying. And an interesting thing, especially about MDMA, from what I understand about it anyway, is that it literally rewires your brain. Like, it's been proven. You can look at it on MRIs, how it rewires and creates new pathways and new grooves in your brain for you, right? And so the day after, the 2 days, 3 days, the week after, the reintegration phase, after taking medicine like that, is profound, because you now have these new, do you ski? Think about fresh powder on a ski
right.
room, right? No grooves in it. That's exactly what happens when you take plant medicine, psilocybin, MDMA, LSD, whatever, is it creates this whole slope of a mountain in your brain with fresh powder for you to choose what grooves you want to kind of go down. And so I've done 3 MDMA specific guided sessions, and those 3 sessions have been probably some of the most transformational experiences of my life. And I've been through a lot. I've gone through a lot of interesting things in my life. I've done some really cool, exciting, things operationally, but these MDMA journeys that I've been down have been so transformational for me that it's almost like hard for people to understand when I say that. Like, really? What happened? Did you? It's hard to describe.
I would put money down right now that if we were to do 2 separate podcasts, one about your operational career and one about your plant-based journey, you can go on for hours and hours and hours uninterrupted about the progress that you've made and the realizations you've had, and you probably get tired after a while speaking about your operational career. That's my guess.
No doubt. I'm already tired of talking about military stuff. Let's talk about MDMA the whole time now.
All right, next podcast. We'll go down the rabbit hole with that. But let's wrap it up, because like I said, we can go down the rabbit hole here. But let's talk a little bit about G.R.I.T, and then Fox 2 Sierra, and what we're doing, what we're collaborating on, in the future. We'll try to keep it somewhat brief, sure, so that we whet people's appetite for the next one.
Yeah, so G.R.I.T, Guardian Rescue Innovative Training, it is my company. I started it pretty much right when I got out of the military. as just an LLC, right? And what I did is initially when I got out, I started doing a lot of contracting work, not like going overseas contracting, more teaching. I was a teacher, I was an instructor, a tactical medical instructor for NSW down here at Stennis Space Station in Mississippi for 3 years. I then went and worked for a couple private companies for tactical medicine instruction or technical rescue, high angle rope scenarios. So I was doing a lot of military type training. But what I realized is that, you know, here are these guys in the special operations world who I know, some of them I know, some of them I'm just getting to know, right? And they are seeking some of my knowledge, whether it's tactical medicine, whether it's technical rescue or decision making or whatever it may be, mindset training. They're seeking this knowledge, right? Top level thinkers in the military. It dawned on me and I quickly realized that people in the private sector want to know about these things, right? Whether it's decision making, whether it's active shooter drills, technical rescue, right? Life-saving interventions. People in the private sector pay people like me to do that, right? Whether it's a corporation or a one-on-one individual or whatever. And so I started kind of like going, you know, military resumes, in my opinion, have a shelf life, right? I'm 5 years separated from the special operations community, right? There are people getting out of the community now that know more than I do, right? So it's almost like kind of my time to start transitioning away from military contracting stuff and finding my next path, right? And that's kind of what's been going on the past 2 years is when my contract started running out and I started figuring out what avenue I'm going to go down. It was coaching. It was one-on-one performance coaching for businesses, for corporations, right? That's initially what I thought about. Was this corporate world needing me to come in and help them in their struggles, their pain points, whatever it may be. But I quickly realized that before I can go and work with a corporation, right, I got to work with the high level individual within that corporation. So they understand what it is that they know what it is that I'm able to bring to the table when it comes to decision making, leadership, knowledge, specificity, and whatever it may be, right? So I started working with CEOs, entrepreneurs, people who are thinking at higher levels, and going through a coaching process with them and coaching them to help them perform at a human level higher than they already are, right? And so that's just one aspect of Guardian Rescue Innovative Training is working with CEOs, high value individuals, people who are looking to perform higher. I take them through a very detailed process to do that. And then we take that process into their business and we help them, you know, in their business, in their executive teams, in their leadership teams, helping them build that process out as well. The other aspect of Guardian Rescue is the things that I know how to do so well. You know, tactical medicine, decision, emergency, action planning, right? Decision-making processes, active shooter drills, all those things that, you know, having a rescue mind like a pararescueman does, right? That's what we are constantly always thinking about is the plan for rescue. What's going to happen if this happens? How are we going to do this, right? And so that's kind of the other aspect of my business is getting hired by schools and law enforcement agencies and State Department agencies and those types of people, or maybe it's a politician's staff who needs to know how to save the politician's life in the event they're in bumfuck Egypt and he gets shot by somebody in the crowd, right? And so that's how we got connected. Fox 2 Sierra. We reached out, y'all reached out on Instagram, we connected, quickly realized that the things that you guys were looking for in an instructor, I was able to offer. We started formulating this relationship and now we have you know, I'm coming up to New York in September to train exactly what we're talking about, tactical medicine, emergency action plans, right? So that way that establishment has a plan, right? You can say, I want to know how to do an active shooter drill, but if you don't have an actual plan that people can follow and know how to attack the problem when it happens, it doesn't matter.
Right. And scenario-based training, right? It's not just coming up with a plan, it's implementing the plan, carrying out the plan, executing, right?
Right. What are you going to do?
Right. And I don't know if you know this, but this popped up shortly before we went online today. Salman Rushdie was giving a lecture today in New York, and somebody just rushed him on stage and stabbed him in the neck multiple times.
Really?
Yeah. So I don't know his condition or anything like that, but there's a fatwa on his head for, I don't know, like
30 years.
Huh?
for 30 years. So
For
that's
30 years. Yeah.
What was it? Who are you talking about? Who got stabbed?
Salman Rushdie's the guy who wrote
He wrote a book. I forget the name of the book now. I'm a little embarrassed.
Salman Rushdie. It came out in the 80s.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was like, you know, what was it? Iran or Iraq? Iran, I'm guessing. Put a fatwa on his head.
To Muhammad, basically.
Right. But anyway, the point is we're living in crazy times, right? So, you know, a couple decades ago, this conversation, if we had this conversation in public, people would probably look at us cross-eyed, right? But with the, you know, advent of you know, school shootings that are going up instead of down, with frequency and severity, as well as just the state of the world today. We're living in really chaotic, unprecedented times, right? The need for self-rescue, the need for development of skills to be able to take care of yourself and your loved ones is paramount. There's never been a time where the need for this is greater than now. And yeah, go ahead.
If I may, and there's never been a time in America where people on a general, you know, individual level are so helpless and untrained, because no one learns this kind of stuff anymore in school, right?
Yeah.
You know, in the Boy Scouts, you learn first aid, you learn ALS, you learn all this. No one learns any of this stuff anymore. Everybody's nose is in their phone or it's in their tablet or whatever, and people just don't know these basic life-saving skills that typical Americans knew in the 50s and 60s and whatever.
I agree with you, and I'm gonna hit on this point even more. So, people now, in my opinion, they don't even have the mindset to think about these things, right? And so that's really one of the biggest things that I focus on when it comes to training is, yeah, you're going to learn how to put on a tourniquet. Yeah, you're going to learn how to put on a chest seal. You're going to learn how to do some life-saving interventions if you have to save somebody's life or shit goes awry, right? But you can't do any of that if your mindset's not right, right? And so that's another big aspect to this type of training, is that you have to have the right type of mindset to be able to rescue somebody, right? I'll never forget one of the first times I was on a rotation. We got this guy, he was shot 5 times through the chest multiple times. We had to crack his chest open horizontally, open it up, and the doctor was just like, PJ, grab his heart. So here I am, I'm pumping this dude's heart in my hand, right? Trying to save this man's life. If you don't have the right mindset for that, you're not gonna be able to do that, right? I don't care who you are. You have to be able to think like, I have to grab this man's heart and be okay with it. And he might die within my hands. And sure enough, he sure did. He died. His heart was in my hands and he died. And if you don't have the mindset to be able to go through something like that, no training that I provide or anybody else provides is going to be effective. You might know it. You might be able to fill out a test and say, you know, what's the first thing to do if you see blood? Direct pressure, right? You might be able to do that, but if you don't know how to physically do that because your mindset's not right, then it's useless, you know. Right. And that's a really big aspect to a lot of the things that are happening in this world right now is mindset. Look at those Uvalde cops. They didn't have the mindset to go in and rescue anybody. They had the mindset to sit behind a wall for 45 minutes until somebody said, okay, you can go in, or they didn't hear any more shooting, right? Their mindset wasn't ready to attack a problem and save lives. It was, well, I don't know what it was. We saw it on video, right?
Right.
Because what you have to think about is, what is the mindset of the attacker? Their mindset is clear. It's destroy anything in my path, right? If the receiver of that attack, if the receiver of that mindset is not ready with a clear mind, you know, I don't care who you are, you're not going to be able to perform underneath in a stressful environment.
Right. And that's why when you come up, you're not coming up for 4 hours. You're coming up for 2 days. You're spending 2 days with us, training, you know, a bunch of people, and you're building out IFACs for every team member that you're going to train, and then train us on those IFACs. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. And we're going to focus on mindset.
Right.
I'm going to put you in stressful situations to make you have to perform in a stressful environment, so that way you can start overcoming that mindset of fear, scarcity, unsureness, all of those things that are real. They are real. I don't want to dismiss them. All of those things are real for people. But you have to, if you're going to survive, if you're going to rescue somebody, if you're going to save a life, you have to be able to put all that aside and focus on the task at hand.
And I'll end with this, and that is a little teaser. All right. Since you mentioned Uvalde, we are collectively working on something right now, as a result of Uvalde and all these other instances and incidents, that will be a game changer in an active shooting school scenario that will undoubtedly change the game plan, save lives, change the battle space. And we're going to share that with you in the coming weeks, hopefully in a month or so. And we'll do more podcasts about it. We'll have videos. We'll show you what we're talking about. So we're looking forward to that. And Dom, first of all, thank you so much. I know we went over a little bit. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all this information, sharing your life, your stories. It's been a real education, entertaining to say the least. And I'm very excited and looking forward to when you come up in September.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you having me. It was great to get together and chat. I'll tell you, next podcast, I'll have some funny stories for you, just so I can kind of replay them in my mind. And then, yeah, man, I'm looking forward to our relationship growing and continuing down this path of education and training and growing our enterprises the way that they're supposed to. So,
amen to that.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
Any final thoughts, Dave?
Only that, well, Izzy and I spoke about Uvalde. We did 3 podcasts on just as that situation unfolded, in a matter of several days, where initially while it was happening, people had certain information or misinformation. And then when more and more of reality started coming out and we all found out what had actually happened, it's heartbreaking. But like you said, you're right. You can train all day, but if you don't have the mindset to go in, you're not going to go in. And if you don't have the money, and the problem is, listen, it's very easy to sit and just talk about it. And Izzy and I, we're like I said before we went on, we're volunteer armed guards for various religious institutions, schools, houses of worship, or whatever. And I think the fundamental difference between what we do and what your average police officer does, and this folds into the training that we're talking about, is when you have community-based teams, community-based training, the people at a church or the people at a school or the people at a whatever, who are, learning to help each other, they're there and they're going to respond to a crisis, and they're going to be saving their friends and their friends' children. Okay, they're not there because they're getting paid to show up and they're doing a job and there's a bunch of random citizens and they don't know. And they're, listen, and I can understand why law enforcement sometimes maybe they're thinking more about themselves rather than the people that they need to save. So our training basically empowers people and to be your own first responder, which is the whole point. Because even if the law enforcement does everything right, they can't get there fast enough to help you when you're already there. Help yourself, right? So that's basically that. So that's just something that that I think is important. And I think it ties into everything that we're both doing.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Okay.
Gang.
All right. Well, we're gonna officially close this podcast. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We look forward to the next one.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Awesome. All right, everybody, have a great weekend.